Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today on Plant Your Seed, joining us from Berlin, Germany, we have Graham and Annette Henry. Graham and Annette are both trained as whole food plant-based educators. The husband and wife team are using their knowledge and passion to help others transition successfully to a more plant-based diet as a route to improved health. Welcome, Graham and Annette.
Hi, great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here on Plant Your Seed. Let's start with how and when did you transition to a plant-based diet?
That probably needs to be me answering that because it's been an extremely long journey for me, which started almost 20 years ago when I had endometriosis and I was getting a recurrence of it. I'd already had surgery for it, major surgery, and I didn't want to go through the whole procedure again. I wanted to do it differently. And as luck would have it, I walked into a bookshop one day and saw a book that said Healing Endometriosis Through Nutrition. And I thought, aha, I might take a look at that. And I read the book and did everything that she suggested. This was not a vegan book, but it did get me off dairy straight away. It suggested that if you had hay fever, then you might be better off not having dairy. So I thought, right, well, that applies to me. So I cut that out straight away. And also she was quite encouraging in terms of eat more whole foods, cook differently from what I was doing. So more steaming and so on rather than frying in particular, and eat something raw with every meal. So that set me off, and I literally worked. I mean, it really did. I never went back to the doctors. I never went through the hospital thing again. And I was so overwhelmed and impressed. I became very, very interested in nutrition. And it seemed that the further I got into that, the less I was eating, certainly processed foods, that they went first, I think, for the most part, although I was still not very good at it initially and determining what really was a processed food. But the animal foods went fairly quickly afterwards in terms of meat, particularly red meat. That I found that very easy to ditch. I didn't really want it anyway. So I was on fewer animal foods for some considerable time. And then Graham and I got together 10 years later, and because I was eating for my health, and although I was better in terms of the endometriosis by that stage, I was aware that menopause would be on its way relatively soon, and I would probably fare well from having this diet continue in order to get through that relatively smoothly. So I was sticking to this diet, and Graham, being very easygoing, decided to join me. So I let him pick it up from there because it had quite a profound and unexpected effect on him.
Yeah, so when Annette and I got together back in 2010, really, yes. I was around 250 pounds in weight. So that's, if you're talking in stones, if anyone's listening from the UK, that's around 18 stone. And I'm now around 160 pounds. About 11 and a half stone. And at the time, in 2010, I was suffering from high blood pressure. I was on medication for it. I had it's now classed as high cholesterol. At the time, I didn't think it was, but I was on statin drugs to reduce my cholesterol. I'd already had a back operation to have a disc removed. Which was probably exacerbated by being overweight for a lot of my adult life. And Annette, really, just meeting her and just kind of fitting into the way that she was eating was just completely transformational for me. So I wasn't at that stage planning to go plant-based. I just incorporated more plant foods in my diet because that's how Annette ate. And really, that was the kind of catalyst that started things on the becoming more plant-based journey through to being completely plant-based. I also realized around about, I think it was about 2013, 2014, that I was having sometimes like bloating after eating. I was a bit of discomfort after eating certain foods, and I had a food intolerance test, and I found that I was intolerant to cow's milk. And also to egg yolk, along with two other things. I think it was two more minor things, but I decided literally overnight to exclude both of those foods from my diet. So rather than just eliminate them for a period of time and reintroduce them, I thought, what's the point? I thought I might as well just exclude them. And I realized now that also helped me to just incorporate more plant foods in my diet, because I thought, I don't need these foods. Why eat them? So I'll let Annette take it back from here.
Okay, in 2013, which is similar to around the time when you had the test, we also, we were pretty wowed by somebody we saw at a festival who was running a raw food retreat. And we thought, oh, let's try that. So we trundled off to Wales to go to this raw food retreat. And of course, it was completely vegan. And eliminated a lot of the things that possibly more Graham was used to having, and it provided quite a detox for him. And I won't go into any more detail than that on that score. We drove away from that thinking, well, no, we don't really want to do the raw thing. But by the time we'd ended our journey, we decided, well, maybe we do. Maybe we want to try this. So we went through that whole process of buying the big blender and a dehydrator, and we got into raw food in quite a big way. And by that stage, we were very close to vegan, but we still weren't, because we were still eating fish, owing to the fact that we were concerned that without it, we wouldn't have enough omega-3. So we were bothered about that. And I was concerned about B12 as well. I was thinking, I'm not eating any animal foods. I can't possibly get B12. I've obviously learnt differently since then. And so we actually used that as we were running a business in England at the time, and inviting people for meals and doing these raw food meals for them, which went down really well. Mm-hmm. However, in 2017, I got it was Christmas, in fact, I got the flu. I got quite a nasty dose of the flu, which I was fairly indignant about, because I thought, how can I get the flu when I'm so healthy? Which, of course, is pride coming before a fall. Mm-hmm. And fall I did, because I didn't really get better for some considerable time, because it left me with chronic fatigue for the rest of the following year and into 2019. And during that time, 2019 in particular, we backtrack just slightly. At the start of this chronic fatigue, I realized there was still something I probably needed to do. And I'd been hearing some of the plant-based doctors, people like Neil Barnard and Dr. Greger and people like that, talking about fats as if they were something that we should be reducing and eating more fruit, which I had quite the opposite mentality for a while. And I thought, what is it they're talking about? I should maybe think about this a little bit, because whilst I had the flu around Christmas time, all I wanted to eat was fruit and very light salad vegetables. That's it. I didn't want anything else for about 5 days. And the two coming together, hearing these doctors and remembering what they'd said and knowing that I only wanted these foods, made me stop and think. And so I actually started to eat much more that way and dramatically cut fats. In fact, I actually cut fats out in terms of extraneous fats from coconut oil and olive oil and so on, because we were eating a lot. I was eating well over 50 calories, well over 50 calories of my, 50%
of your calories.
Yes, I was suddenly thinking, do I need to put this into an American measurement? That is through me. Mm-hmm. So I was eating a very high fat diet without even really thinking about it. I've always been slim, so I didn't need to consider my weight. And clearly this fat was going somewhere, and where it was going, I think, was possibly to my liver, because when I palpated that area, it was very tender. And so I cut fat out. I didn't stop eating nuts and seeds altogether, although I dramatically reduced that too. But the fat disappeared and the chronic fatigue improved. Certainly by 2019, I was getting better and increasingly better. And in 2019 is when we decided to embark on a really exciting course. It was particularly exciting for us. We decided we needed to really intensify our learning. So we knew what we were doing when we were working with clients. And so we signed up for a year-long class or a course, if you like, with doctors Rick and Karen Diener, who are based in California. Mm-hmm. And their course is called Mastering Raw Food Nutrition, because that was clearly our interest at the time. In practice, it turned out to be a course primarily about whole plant foods, and not specifically raw, but that the emphasis is on fruits and vegetables. And that changed us all completely. So that's at the point where we became fully plant-based, when we started on that course.
Just recently, you've become fully plant-based.
It's been coming on for some time, but the fully plant-based has been since 2018. Yes.
I'd love to get back to your story about endometriosis. And in case our listeners don't know, endometriosis is often a painful disorder in which tissue similar to the tissue that normally lines the inside of the uterus, the endometrium, grows outside the uterus.
That's right.
There is some research that discovered that the risk of being diagnosed with endometriosis was 2.4 times higher in women with greater or equal to 5 years of oral contraceptive pills versus never users of oral contraceptive pills. Now, do you feel that that had any impact on you?
It's a really good question. And I might be tempted to say yes, because I was briefly on the pill really to regulate my periods when I was a teenager. The thing that stops me from concluding that is that I have two sisters, and very shortly after I'd been in hospital having this operation for endometriosis, each of my sisters did exactly the same thing, and neither of them has ever been on the pill. So we also suspect some kind of genetic component. But clearly food can influence how your body heals from it or not. It's possibly interesting to you to know that of the two sisters, one of them contacted me one day and said, "What's the book that you read? Because I think I want to do this." So she also read this book, and she also recovered well enough to get pregnant. And I now have a nephew as a result. The other sister, who had other health conditions to contemplate and was seeing doctors rather more frequently than me or my other sister, she didn't take on the dietary advice. She decided not to go that route. And in the meantime, she's had 5 operations for endometriosis. So that's kind of interesting too.
Now, what book was it about healing endometriosis through nutrition did you find?
It's called A Key to Healing Endometriosis by someone called Diane Shepperson Mills. As I say, the book isn't vegan. I'm kind of glad, because at the time I wasn't ready for that. I felt I was making quite big changes by ditching dairy and eating proper foods. That was quite a big move for me. So it probably was good for me that it wasn't. But she's a nutritionist, and she'd gone through this herself and started to understand what factors can contribute to causing or to making it worse, and also to making it better. And the book was really detailed, full of case studies and biological explanations, which I really appreciated, because I needed proof. Nobody anywhere in my experience was suggesting that food might impact on health other than make you fat or not. That was as much as I knew. And certainly I wasn't getting anything from the medical profession. I was treated really, really well when I went into hospital, and all the time I was dealing with the medics, the specialist in particular. But there was absolutely zero mention of food at any point. So I had no strong belief in this working, and I needed persuading. So I was really glad with the way she set the book out. It turned my life around, really, because it redirected me ultimately, even if it took me a long time to get where I am now.
Why do you think conventional medicine ignores food as a way to heal endometriosis?
I think it's very, very straightforward. They absolutely don't know about it. I remember going through, this is probably almost 9 or 10 years ago, just out of interest, because it's not of interest to most people, but it was to me. I went through all of the medicine courses at UK universities just to see what was available in terms of nutrition. And it was almost zero. It was at best an elective, something they could opt into most of the time, or it was a very short program. We're talking about like a matter of hours, maybe 7 hours, something like that as a maximum. So they don't learn nutrition. So if they don't learn it, then it's not going to have any value. And that needs to change. And I think it is doing, but it's still really slow. And of course, it's not feeding through to those doctors who are practicing now. And it's not that they're not even interested sometimes. It's just that they just don't know. And some of them aren't interested. They're totally invested in the pharmaceutical and surgical responses to illness that they've learnt about, and don't believe that food is potent enough. I mean, I've come across medics who've talked to me like that as well, who don't believe that it's got anything to offer.
It's also not got a great amount of profit to offer as well, because you can't patent a food,
right,
unless you change it somehow, and then it's no longer a whole food anyway. So it's really set up for failure.
Yes.
Now, some of our listeners might think, how is it possible to heal tissue growing outside the uterus with food? What have you found as a person who has had endometriosis?
How the tissue actually worked, I don't know, but I have considered this quite a lot, and there are all sorts of factors. It's an estrogen dominant disease, and I think that I strongly suspect that ditching the dairy was hugely beneficial in terms of reducing my circulating estrogen. I was also persuaded to drink less. Not that I was a super heavy drinker, but I was drinking less. That also influences estrogen levels. And the saturated fat in dairy, I think that was a key factor for reducing those circulating estrogens. But also, the more whole foods that you eat, and with antioxidants and fiber and so on, escorting the estrogen out of the body and supporting your body generally to be able to heal itself, because that's ultimately what this is about. I mean, it was a revelation to me when I realized that other people could heal their conditions through more or less the same diet that I was eating, even though their condition was very different, because I had that medical mindset of, if you've got condition A, then you need this medication to deal with it, and condition B will require something different again. But in fact, you're bringing your body into homeostasis, into balance, by eating foods that it knows how to use and that it can make best use of, and at the same time taking out the things that are compromising the functions of your body. So I don't know if that's quite the answer you were looking for, but that's how it seems to me to have been possible for my body to heal from this.
What was going through your head at that time where you picked up that book?
That's a really good question. I was excited because I thought, this might really lead to something that I can use. But I was really skeptical as well. I think I was quite cynical. I'd gone through life, as many people do, believing in whatever comes our way from the mainstream sources, and I thought medicine was the way you dealt with anything that was physical. So it seemed unusual to me that food might work, because doctors weren't talking about it. So how could it possibly work? So it was a bit conflicted, really. I was excited, and I really read the book from cover to cover more than once, and really took it on board. And it was only really when I started to notice differences in myself, which happened thankfully reasonably quickly, that I started to believe in it and realized that hold on a minute, I feel I've been conned. I've not been told about this by people who've been treating me. I've gone through a whole round of surgery and all sorts of unpleasant medications, sort of synthetic hormones and so on, in order to deal with this. Did I need them? And how many more would I have had if I'd continued to go down the medical route, not taken on board the food recommendations that I'd read in this book? So yeah, mixed feelings, really mixed feelings.
How did you feel when that happened? You're sitting there, you're reading this book, you're understanding it, but yet you're also thinking about the medical field, and you're trying to put it together, what's best for you. And at that moment, what did you feel?
I think that my feelings just generally, but they changed from the skepticism to it did get better as I read the book because it made sense. And I think as I progressed, I'm not quite sure where this came in, but I felt quite let down. I felt let down by the medical world, really, and that it seemed to be so standardized. It wasn't the physicians and nurses and people who treated me specifically. It wasn't them. It was an institutional issue that was throughout the whole of the medical world, and I felt really let down by it initially. I felt quite angry and bemused. I couldn't understand initially why it was. I had no idea that the pharmaceutical industry has such a hold. I had no idea of this kind of thing. It was all part of another world that I hadn't inhabited until then. So yeah, a mix of feelings really as I progressed through the book and then onwards from actually putting it into practice.
Now, when you think about that decision to change from the conventional medicine to an alternative treatment, what sticks out in your mind?
That's a really good question, because I realized as I was actually doing it and starting to make myself a little bit different, that it required a little bit of bravery, a little bit of courage, because I really was different. I lived in a place in northern England, and we're not talking a big place here. It was very, very small, very provincial. And I literally was the only person I knew who was not consuming dairy. I'm sure there were others, but I didn't know any. I knew somebody who was vegetarian, and that was about it. And so I became quite a curiosity. I was a teacher at the time, and the other members of staff were really curious and asking me lots of questions, and they were nice about it. But I clearly was different. I stuck out a bit like a sore thumb, and also going out to eat was a little bit challenging as well, because that wasn't understood, and I didn't enjoy constantly asking, has it got dairy in it? Because also, apart from having to ask the question and making myself noticeable, I realized I was getting answers back that confirmed for me that people didn't understand what dairy was. They didn't understand whether that was eggs. They didn't understand sometimes even gluten. I got the answer back once that it contains wheat. It's got gluten in it. I thought, well, that's not really what I'm asking about. It wasn't understood. So there was a degree of courage to keep going with it, and feeling just a little bit alienated some of the time, but not through anybody's deliberate attempt to belittle me in any way. It was just because it was unknown and not understood.
Now, in 2018, you mentioned that you had a virus-induced chronic fatigue. Can you tell us more about that and how you healed yourself?
It came as a shock to me to get the flu, which I feel a little bit embarrassed about now, because anybody can get ill any of the time. And it turns out I really wasn't eating as well as I thought. We were eating this raw food diet with, as I think I've already mentioned, lots of fat and plenty of nuts and seeds and avocados and all the rest of it, really enjoying it and being very creative, because cooking was never my thing. So putting things together in like raw cheesecakes and so on, I was really enjoying doing that, and I was quite good at it.
You were vegan at this time?
I would say that no. The one thing that stopped us being vegan was not eating, wanting to keep eating fish, because we were worried about omega-3 and vitamin B12, because we assumed that if you had to supplement these things, then there must be something wrong with the diet. So that was something. That was a trap we were in, I suppose, at that point. So no, not fully vegan by that stage. I say we're eating fish. We were eating the smallest amount of fish per week. It won't have done the trick anyway. So anyway, that's by the by now. But the chronic fatigue was the thing. Well, the flu, in fact, was a trigger for making me stop and take notice of doing things differently, eating differently, and really cleaning up my diet. The point of being very whole food and very much based on fruits and vegetables first and foremost, but with legumes, with grains, as we do now. I mean, our diet isn't fully raw. We went away from that, and it was for me particularly the chronic fatigue that got me started on that, and then it was confirmed in a most practical and quite scientific way by doing the course with Doctors Rick and Karen Diener. So that was a really good support for figuring out why it was that I was switching to doing something almost the opposite of what I had been doing in terms of the fat and the fruit. I didn't eat fruit very much. I'd have maybe 2 pieces of fruit a day, and thought that I shouldn't have much more because sugar is sugar. And I got rid of that fruit fear. So that's long gone now.
Now, Graham, you have lost about 90 pounds. So you've gone from about 240 pounds, 250 pounds to about 150.
Yeah, 156, yeah.
Yeah, how does that make you feel?
A damn sight lighter. I mean, I sometimes joke with people and say that I've actually lost Annette, because literally I've virtually lost Annette's body weight, which to put things in perspective. And it makes me feel, I mean, I was carrying this weight really ever since, I mean, not to that degree. I mean, I got up to the peak in my mid-40s. But I was carrying far too much overweight for far too many years of my life, from about the age of 11. And it had become part of who I was. I mean, you know, I was Graham, always the happy fat person. Because I was always upbeat, happy, you know, people knew me for that. I was kind of the not, I wouldn't say the life and soul of the party, but I was always upbeat. And suddenly losing all this weight, I literally became a different person. And there was a period where I think it took me a while to actually almost catch up with myself and redefine myself as a person, because everybody recognized me as that person who is big. And suddenly I was no longer that person anymore. And I know that for my family, for my parents, who, you know, both my parents are still alive in their mid to late 80s now, and my brother and sister, and for them it was difficult for them, I think, to come to terms with the fact that here was a different person they'd known all their life, from me being 11 years old, being overweight, and I think it took them a while, and I think it was difficult for them as well. So there was a period of transition for me, whereas now I love it. I love the fact I'm healthy. I came off all of my meds. My blood pressure normalized. The doctor was happy for me to come off the meds. I'm no longer on statins, and we walk regularly every day. We walk 5 miles a day. We do around 40 miles a week, on 40 miles a week on average, and we love it. You know, we're just very active, and so yeah, it's been a journey.
Now, you were on kind of a yo-yo diet journey, right? You would try diets, and then they would work for a minute, and then you'd go back. When you met up with Annette and you started to eat more whole foods and plant-based, what was your feeling when you started losing weight, just not even trying?
Absolute astonishment, utter surprise, because I wasn't actually on a diet. I was just changing the way I ate, and I wasn't actually feeling hungry. I was just eating different foods that were filling me, because as I know now, because they were full of fiber and, you know, lots of water content, particularly in fruits and vegetables, and they were tasty, and it was like, wow, this was the answer all along. It was what I was putting in my mouth. It wasn't about cutting calories or prohibiting myself, starving myself. That wasn't the way to do it. It was actually eating proper foods. And I thought, I've gone through all these years of my life not knowing this. So it was an epiphany, really. It was a complete revelation.
Now, were you ever concerned about the weight loss? Like, is there something wrong with me? I'm losing so much weight so quickly. What was the concern?
No, I actually wasn't, because interestingly, the weight that I was losing, it wasn't like I lost kind of like within 1 or 2 weeks, 6-7 pounds or whatever. It was actually just a gradual, consistent loss. So maybe over a course of a month, you know, I kind of find that I'd lost maybe 7 pounds. 6-7 pounds. I thought, great. And then maybe it would plateau for a while. I think, oh, well, maybe that was it. I've just lost some excess and that's it now. And then it would start again. And it was in stages. And it took me probably from the top weight to where I am now, it probably took around 3-4 years, I would say, to get to where I wanted to be. But I didn't push myself. I didn't kind of say, oh, I've got to starve myself now so I lose that extra stone. It was just gradual. So from where I was concerned and from where Annette was standing, it was fine. And I had no concerns whatsoever. I just was very pleased. And I felt a little bit sad that my family actually did express concern. I remember my sister saying to me, I hadn't seen my sister for a while because she lives up in Scotland and she hadn't been to visit for a while. And she saw me maybe having not seen me for about 10 or 12 months. And she was quite taken aback. And she said, oh, God, you look so different. She said, your face is different. She said, your eyes look like too big for your face. I said, what do you mean? And of course, it was just she wasn't used to seeing me with a face that wasn't kind of like three chins or whatever. And she actually said, you look like one of those rabbits that's got that disease. Your eyes are too big. I think we call it myxomatosis. I said, thanks, thanks a bunch. I felt offended. But I soon realized that she actually it was just the juxtaposition really from what she'd seen before and the present me. So she soon realized that. I think, to be honest, I think she was a little bit jealous as well because she's had a weight issue for most of her adult life as well. And so I think it was difficult for her to come to terms with that.
Now, you mentioned that you got off of your blood pressure meds and you had high cholesterol. When did you get off of the blood pressure meds on your journey when you were losing weight?
I'm casting my mind back now. I think it was around about 2016. So that's what, 6 years ago now. I can't believe it. So it's just flown. I remember starting to feel I had a part-time job at that time. We were running our own business, but it wasn't sustainable to bring in the level of income that we needed at that time. And I was working at a health food store, a health chain, part-time. And I remember, so I was like on my feet for 6-7 hours a day there. And again, that helped with the weight loss because I was doing a lot of standing up and walking around. And I remember feeling sometimes a little bit lightheaded. And I thought, I'm going to have to check my blood pressure. And I checked it and it was incredibly low. And I was still on medication at this point. And I thought, maybe actually I don't need so much medication now because I've lost the weight. If my blood pressure's naturally come down and I'm taking the medication on top of that, maybe it's going too low. And having tested it, that seemed to be the case. So I went, made an appointment with the doctor and, went to see him and I explained my situation and he was extremely supportive and said, well, look, he said, we can't take you off it completely, all at once. We need to wean you off it gradually. So he said, cut it by half and, come and see me again in a few weeks' time and we'll test it again and then we'll see where we go. So I did that, went again. I said, yep. He says, I'm happy for you to come off it now. And that was it. And as I say, 6 years ago, and the rest is history. I haven't been on it since. I'd already come off the statin drugs before that because I felt they weren't suiting me. And I had a blood test and the doctor said, you maybe should come off them. And I said, I'm pretty confident I can do this by diet now because I was already on this journey and they seemed happy for me to do that. So that was how it all worked out.
Now, you said it was 2016. When did you start? I'm just trying to get an idea for our listeners, the time frame. Yeah.
So I started losing the weight around about probably mid-2010. And as I say, it was very gradual. I just assumed that I'd always have to be on blood pressure medication. So it didn't even occur to me that I could go to the doctor and say, can I come off them? Because I think at that stage, I didn't make the connection that I've lost all this weight, therefore I can come off my blood pressure medication. It was really only when I started to feel in 2016, 5.5 years later, probably, or it's maybe 5 years later, and I was feeling lightheaded, that I thought, actually, I can probably come off those drugs now. Why haven't I thought of this? So yeah, I would say it was about 5 years.
How did that make you feel when you were able to come off of the medications that you had for a long time?
Absolutely wonderful, because I'd been actually on medication since the mid-1990s. So that was a period of about 20 years. And I just thought that I'd be on them for life. That's more or less what the medical profession was telling me, that, this is it, you're going to have to take these now because of the risks, etc. And I was absolutely elated. I felt proud of myself, and I felt proud of Annette for actually helping me along the journey. And I just wanted to shout it from the rooftops and say, we can do this through diet. We don't have to be on these medications all our life. We just, if we just eat the right foods and live the right lifestyle, we can do this without having to resort to medication. And that's very much the view I'm of now. And the way I see it, that yes, drugs do have a place. Acute medicine interventions have a place, but I think in a lot of chronic conditions, we can actually rectify them through lifestyle. I think it's reckoned that up to about 80% of chronic conditions are caused through lifestyle. So if we can rectify the lifestyle part of it, there's a good chance that we can alleviate, resolve, or prevent our chronic conditions. And I think, I was one of those who was able to alleviate and resolve mine.
So just to review, you were on medication for 20 years, and then within 6 years of eating better, you came off of those meds.
Yes, I would say it was probably, certainly the blood pressure. I think I came off statins earlier, but the blood pressure medication, yes. But I come off those a lot earlier had I thought about asking the doctor, is it okay for me to come off them now? I'm slightly strange because I have this syndrome called white coat syndrome, that when I have my blood pressure tested, it always is much higher. I don't know why. I've always had a bit of a phobia about it. So, of course, whenever I went to the doctor to have my blood pressure tested, it was always artificially high. And I think that when I tested it, when I was having these symptoms of blood pressure, when I was working on the shop floor at this health, I think that it was because I wasn't even thinking about it. It was just I happened to have the symptoms of low blood pressure. Of course, when I went and checked, I remember the first reading was high. I said, well, a bit high to me. I said, look, honestly, I can tell you this is what I'm feeling. And I showed him the readings on the self-testing machine that I had. And he said, OK, well, we'll calibrate your machine and see if it's kind of showing, fairly accurate readings. And it was. So he was happy to indulge me in that. And, he was happy for me to come off the medication.
Now, have you guys ever struggled with eating out with friends? Or now you mentioned that your family, it was difficult for them to understand you losing your weight. Have you had any struggles when you first became plant-based?
My family, bless them, they eat, let's say, a very much standard Western diet still. I'm considered a little bit out there, a little bit weird. In suddenly I'm vegan, not eating any meat or eggs or dairy or fish. And they've known me for so many years where I was, that something must have happened. What's gone on there? And therefore it was difficult for them to accept it, but also it was difficult for them to cater for me, because a lot of people, when you say vegan, they cower away thinking, what am I supposed to make for that person, because they don't eat normal food. And of course we know now that isn't the case. And therefore, yes, it could be a challenge sometimes. And it was the same with friends as well. More often than not, we would say, well, look, it's OK. We'll bring something with us. Don't worry about it. We're fine. We're coming to see you because we love you, not coming to eat alone. It's about you.
Now, you guys mentioned that you were concerned about omega-3s and B12, and that's one of the reasons that you continued to eat fish. What did you find as a replacement for omega-3s and B12?
Oh, yes, a good one. Well, we actually haven't, in a sense, although we do ensure that we have plenty of omega-3 in our diets. So talking about flax seeds and chia seeds, but of course that's the ALA, and there's no guarantee that EPA and DHA. So we do take an algae supplement. And in terms of B12, I don't think there's any. We don't eat fortified food there. We take a supplement, and that's non-negotiable. I think it has to be. It's just one of those things you have to do. And also finding out that a lot of the animal feed is now supplemented with B12 because it's so deficient in their diet too, makes me think, well, what was I worried about? It was going to be supplemented anyway because it's just deficient generally in a lot of the diet. Either the animals are supplemented or we are, and I'd rather go direct.
What is one thing that's really exciting you with your project right now?
Opening up and really plow ahead with the business that we set up here now in Berlin. And it's a two-sided thing in a sense, because we're meeting a lot of other people. We're part of something called the Vegan Business Tribe, where we're aligned with a lot of people whose goal is much the same as ours, and they're doing in a passionate and mission way, which is really exciting to us. We're also part of the Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, and both of these things contribute to the direction that we're taking with our business. So the classes that we're running, they're based primarily around the food we had. So recently Graham did one called 8 Ways to Weight Loss, things that he's actually discovered that contributed to his weight loss, even though he didn't necessarily understand them at the time. And I did one on sprouting, which was really good, a bit more practical. I really enjoyed that. I've also been doing a 10-week meditation course because we're aiming to introduce more consciousness to what we're doing and to enable people to experience the world in a more greater awareness, because those two things do go together really well and are very relevant to have together, we've found. So it's that's exciting us at the moment, and keep coming up with new ideas and being inspired by these groups that we're in.
I think also for me, on top of that, it's being able to utilize the knowledge and learning that we've incorporated ourselves through being on what we consider the best we could possibly have been on, to assimilate all that information, to be in a position where we can share it with others and help them to make a real difference to their own lives. It really does feel so rewarding to be able to do that. And we really want to inspire people because we feel that inspiration is the best way to make changes. Inspiration is a great motivator, and we're getting to do that every day.
Now, finally, can you give me one word to describe how you felt before you became vegan, and one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
If I could use 3 words, I would say lost my way, but I'll try and put it into one word, and I would say directionless. Whereas now I would say connected.
Ah, connected. And Annette?
Purposeless. I think that's my word for my former life. And I would describe myself now as awake, much more aware of life in a very different way now.
It's such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. What's the best way for people to follow you on Instagram, the web in general?
Well, we are active on Instagram, Henry and Henry Europe on Instagram, and we're also on Facebook. We have a website, which is www.henryandhenryeu.com. So HenryAndHenryEU.com. Thanks again, Graham and Annette, for being on Plant Your Seed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope you are inspired by this story, and remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review, and until next time, thank you for listening.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.